Hey, welcome everyone to a Keptn community webinar. I think it's the first time we kind of give it that name. We always call it community meetings. Now, as you probably heard, if you follow us, we're kind of splitting it between the developer-focused meetings that happened on a regular basis every week on a Thursday, and then talking really more about from the engineering team to the developers. They will show a lot of stuff that they're planning, that they're working on individual sprints. And then we also have these Keptn community webinars where we focus on end user use cases. And we had people in the past that talked about integrating Keptn with GitLab. We had a session last time around Atlassian. Today, I want to talk about leveling up your Jenkins-based delivery with Keptn. So I have invested the last couple of weeks in figuring out how can we use the stuff that we built with Keptn to really level up Jenkins-based delivery. And I want to show you kind of what I have come up with when I looked at how we internally at DynaTrace actually use Jenkins, how our customers are using Jenkins, and what I see out there. And I think there's a couple of use cases how we can level up Jenkins pipelines with the help of Keptn. The first one is around automating build approvals. So I think there's a lot of time spent in manual approvals. I believe we can automate that, and we can save a lot of time. Now, whether you agree with me on the 80% or not, that's obviously debatable, but I think what I've seen, there's a lot of manual time wasted in manual build approvals. The second thing is around enabling a performance-driven culture. So this is the whole thing about performance as a self-service, continuous performance as a self-service. There's different terms around it. But the idea is how can we give developers, engineers an easy automated self-service way to get performance feedback of a new artifact that they have. The third use case is about automating monitoring configuration as part of delivery. I think we all agree that as we are getting more, as monitoring becomes more prominent, I think in these days, and as we are delivering more artifacts through our pipeline, these two systems need to be connected much better together. And there's ways how the delivery pipelines can tell the monitoring tool about when a deployment happened, who deployed it, what are features that are involved. And then the monitoring tool can also tell back to the pipeline and say, hey, this is a bad deployment, so you may want to stop that build because it's not good at all, or mark it as bad. The fourth thing now is also a way that I think most of us will experience soon. Those of us that have invested in pipelines over the last couple of years probably started with a team building pipelines. The pipelines grew, then they were copy pasted over from one team to another application. And what we have seen both internally and also externally with our customers that we work with, a lot of people have monolithic pipelines that do pretty much everything. There's a lot of hard-coded things on how they integrate with tools, and it's copy-pasted all over the place. So it's very hard to maintain and also very hard to build something new in these pipelines. So this is where we talk about breaking up the monolithic pipelines and then using a choreography engine, a delivery choreography engine. In this case, it's Keptn, that can then choreograph the individual pieces that then Jenkins can still do, but overall we break up the monolith and make it more event-driven and connecting it through a choreography engine. So what I want to focus on today, because I only have an hour, so I cannot cover everything, but I want to cover the first two in very much detail, and then a little bit the third one, and the last one, we will do these in another webinar. All right, so let's start with the first one. First use case, automate build approvals through SLI and SLO-based quality gates. What's the challenge? As I highlighted earlier, I think the challenge is that if you look at the Jenkins pipeline, between testing and then maybe the next stage, which is staging, then you have a lot of time wasted or spent in manual approvals. Why? Because whoever needs to make the decision needs to look at the test trends and maybe, is this a problem because now we have higher test failure rates? Yes or no? I don't know. Then, well, let's have a look at the performance results. I know we have great plugins that pull in, let's say, ChainMeter results into Jenkins, but really is one build versus the other better? It's really hard to tell, so I need to dig deeper. Then, fortunately, a lot of people are now using also APM products or monitoring tools, whether it's Prometheus or DynaTrace. But then we often see that it's a lot of data, but it's unstructured. And also it's hard to know which data actually comes from my test versus another pipeline run versus maybe somebody else that is just doing some random testing. So this is why a lot of time is needed, manual time, to really figure out this is a good build or a bad build. The solution to this problem is the way Keptn implements it, and the way we also have a very tight integration with testing tools where we feed data context to the underlying monitoring tool. So the way the pipelines will change if you follow our best practices is when you run the tests from your pipeline, whether you're triggering a ChainMeter test or a Gatling or a Neotis or a Selenium test, the first goal is that you're actually adding a tag to these requests so that the monitoring tool underneath, whether it's Prometheus, whether it's DynaTrace, whether it's some other APM tool, understands that this data now comes in from this particular test, from this particular test transaction. Then, instead of having to look at dashboards and digging through data, we follow the approach of SLI and SLO-based validations, where you specify your SLIs, your SLOs. Keptn then reaches out to the underlying monitoring tools, pulling out this information for the time frame of the test, validating them, and then giving you the result on how am I doing with my key metrics. Are they good? Are they bad? Have they changed from one build to the other? And then reporting back that result to the pipeline. And the way this can be fully automated. That's why I'm a strong believer we can highly make these pipelines more efficient here. All right. Quick primer or quick intro into SLIs and SLOs in case you're not familiar with it. SLIs are so-called service level indicators. SLO are service level objectives. We didn't come up with it. Google has been spearheading all of this around their SRE practice, their site reliability engineering best practices. But this is the way we have implemented it in Keptn, because I know there's other tools out there as well. A lot of people are trying to implement it themselves. We've also implemented it in Keptn as part of our quality gate capability, where Keptn can dig into different data sources to pull data out. But essentially what it is, you define your SLIs, your service level indicators, you specify it in a YAML file that you then have to give Keptn. You specify what are the indicators, what are the metrics that are important for you, and then depending on the tool, for instance, here with DynaTrace, we have a DynaTrace query that can be used and accepted by the metrics API that DynaTrace provides. For Prometheus, it would look similar. For Neoload, it would look, they have their own query language. But you say, what are the metrics that are important? And then you specify your SLOs. What are your objectives? If you analyze a particular time frame of a test, and if you look at individual metrics, your indicators, what is a pass and what is a warning criteria? And here we allow you to combine both static versus dynamic thresholds, meaning you can actually compare with previous builds, or you can enforce static thresholds. How does this work? If you enforce the Keptn quality gate, if you say, Keptn, please evaluate, let's say 30 minutes for a particular service that I want you to manage. Here's my SLI, here is my SLO, then Keptn goes off, reaches out to the data source, could be DynaTrace, Prometheus, Neoload, or any other tool. Then these tools are returning the values. Then Keptn is scoring these SLIs. So for every metric, we basically validate, are we in the passing range, in the warning range, or did we violate our objective for that SLI? So we do this for every metric. And then overall, when we look at all the metrics and we do the validation for everyone, we know, hey, 7 out of 8 are good. That means we achieved 87.5%. That's green, because we can also specify a total score acceptance rate. Or in case of a bad build, if only 4 out of 8 are good, then we only have 50% of possible points achieved. So that might be a bad build. Right? To give you a little more visual and graphic, we all like tables, I believe, right? The explainer. So SLIs, it's really about what are the indicators, what are the metrics that are important for you. This could be a response time of a service. This could be, as you see, failure rate. It could be response time of a particular transaction, the number of database calls for a particular transaction. It could also be memory usage. It could be network traffic. It could be anything from any layer of your stack. Then you specify your SLOs. So here is where you can define what are my static, my dynamic thresholds. So static means statically enforced, dynamic by comparing it with previous builds. And then you specify an overall goal. So what do I consider as being a good build? If I achieve 90% success, then it's good. If I'm between 75 and 90, it's warning. Everything below is failed. So now the way you can use Keptn, you can say, Keptn, do an evaluation for a particular project, for a particular time frame. let's say I'm doing this for build 1, metrics come in, they're all green, that's great, I get a 100% rating. Build 2 comes along, right? You do another run, 2 of the metrics are now in warning stage, which means overall I get 75%. Still it's warning. Build number 3 comes along, has a bad violation on the database calls because it just increased it from 3 to 6 database calls for the login transaction. That's no good. So now we are down to 62.5%, which means we let the build fail. Build 4 comes along, everything is green again, and this is good. So this is how, from a high level perspective, SLIs and SLO work in Keptn. Now, not only does it look nicely here on this kind of Excel type of table, we also have a UI built into Keptn. We both have a heat map that you will see later in my demo, where we basically show the same table that I just shown you. So the heat map visualizes every single result of my SLIs, every single SLI for every single build. These are the columns. And on the top is the score. So this is the aggregated score for an individual build that immediately tells you green build or yellow or red build. And if it's yellow or red, you can look down at which metrics actually failed. And on the bottom is also a screenshot of the chart visualization. You can also chart the individual metrics, the actual values, so you can see also trends over time. All right. So today I want to focus on Keptn with Jenkins and DynaTrace as a monitoring tool. If you're using Prometheus or other tools, there's also great tutorials on tutorials.keptn.com, for instance, for Prometheus. If you have other monitoring tools, then I'm sure you can be invited to write an SLI provider for that monitoring tool. But today I want to focus on DynaTrace, and I want to give you some insights on how you would actually set up DynaTrace so that you take most out of this integration that we've built, and then integrating it with Jenkins. So what I've done, I've installed Keptn. In order to install Keptn, you either need Kubernetes or you need a Linux machine. I highlight here Ubuntu Linux because we have a really cool script from one of our colleagues, Sergio, who completely automated the installation on micro Kubernetes. What you also need, you need a DynaTrace tenant, and from that an API and a pass token. Now this can be a DynaTrace tenant that is already monitoring in an existing environment. Right? When we talk about Keptn, we often talk about Keptn doing the deployment, and then you only monitor the stuff that Keptn deploys. Today I also want to focus on, you can use Keptn and the quality gates and all the stuff I show you also by looking at data from environments that are completely outside of where Keptn is deployed. So you can really deploy Keptn as an additional service, and then get your SLIs and your SLOs from any type of environment that you monitor with DynaTrace, where it's, as you can see, all the logos on the bottom, right? It doesn't matter. It will work with anything that you monitor. So how does this work? By the way, there's also great tutorials out there, but you install Keptn, either the full or the quality gate version of it, then Keptn will install its components into your Kubernetes cluster or micro Kubernetes around deployment, notify, evaluation, testing. And also it has Git inside. So Git is part of Keptn, because every configuration element we give Keptn later on will be stored in its internal Keptn Git repository. Then in order to enable DynaTrace support, you need to first create a secret for DynaTrace where you save the token and the endpoint, so that later on Keptn can access that. Then you install the so-called DynaTrace service, and you also install the so-called DynaTrace SLI service. It's two comments that two kubectl applies that you do. It's all documented pretty well, so very easy and straightforward. Then you say Keptn configure monitoring DynaTrace. That's a Keptn CLI command, which will automatically do a lot of things. It will enable, first of all, the integration between DynaTrace and Keptn. It will configure tagging rules. It will create a dashboard for you. It does a lot of cool things fully automatically. It configures your monitoring tool, basically. If you want to install all this on Ubuntu, as I said, check out Keptn in a box. This is the script that Sergio, he wrote and he showed off last week. All right, last thing, this was just installation. Now, normally, if you would use Keptn like this and you want to interact with it, you want to work with Keptn and you want to set up quality gates and do evaluations, you would need to create a Keptn project. So for instance, perf project, what this will actually do, it will create a repo within its GitHub, within its Git repository. It will also create branches for the individual stages. You would need to then create service, which again will provide the structure in Git, and then you would need to add resources. You basically upload files that then Keptn and all its tools it's talking to can access. Now the good thing is, I'll show you today how all this can be fully automated without you having to do anything, right? Because I wrote a Jenkins shared library that does all of this for you, manages your projects, and the only thing you have to do is, here are my files, and run with it. All right, that was the first thing, installing Keptn. The second thing is, what's very important with any type of monitoring tool, but this is not true for DynaTrace, you need to think about tagging. So when we are later on, when we let Keptn query our monitoring tool to query certain parts of our infrastructure, let's say a metric from a certain host, a process or a service or an app, we need to tell DynaTrace, in this case, for what particular service. And the way this works is through tags. And the reason why I highlight this, because tags are very, very important. And the way Keptn talks to DynaTrace is also through tag-based filtering. So for instance, one way could be a very simple tag. You just put a tag on your service in DynaTrace that says eval service, eval for evaluation. So then I can later on say, I want to query data from services that have this tag on it. It can also be a set of tags. It could be that you are tagging the environment and maybe then the service type, or you can also follow the best practices or actually see what Keptn is doing. If you use Keptn for deployment, we also, Keptn by default, if you deploy an app into Kubernetes with Keptn, then it sets 4 tags: project, service, stage, and deployment. But what I'm showing you today will work also, obviously, if you don't use Keptn for deployment, if you just manually take your services and then you can pull in the data. Okay, what's the next thing we need to do? Remember, one of the problems I highlighted is that when we execute tests right now and we look at APM data, that there's often no connection between them. I don't know which data comes from my testing tool. So in DynaTrace, we have the ability to allow the testing tool to tag its requests. What you see on the left is my ChainMeter script that I'm going to use later on. And I have different test steps. I have homepage, version, echo, and invoke. And what we and DynaTrace allow your test tools to do is to add an additional HTTP header on every request and then giving it name value pairs. So TSN would stand for test step name. There can be multiple, so you can also do script name, you can do virtual user ID, you can do whatever you want, right? But the idea is, once you add context to your requests, you can now use a really cool new feature in DynaTrace. It's new since about November, that is called calculated service metrics. So you can now instruct DynaTrace to not only give you response time and failure rate and maybe throughput of your service that you're testing, but actually splitting it by your test step name. So here's one example, and I come to more examples later, but we can now create metrics like request time by test name, or number of database calls by test step, number of service calls, CPU time, wait time. We can do a lot of things and getting metrics that are now specific to individual tests. We get it more granular. Why do we want to do this? Well, because once you start doing this, you can create, first of all, your dashboards. I think we still want to start with dashboards to get kind of an idea on feeling what are metrics that are important. What would I normally look at during a test? So in my case here, I can create a dashboard. Also on the top, I have my tags. This is why tags are important, right? You want to build a dashboard, and then maybe you want to look at a particular app or at a particular service, and tags allow you to filter. It's the same filtering mechanism we use later on from the Keptn side. But what I can put on these dashboards are now especially these metrics, and I can split them up by, again, my test steps, my invoke, my echo, my version, and my homepage. So these are my 4 test steps. And I can now have a dashboard that I can look at, and it makes much more sense now if I analyze it. But remember what I said earlier, dashboards is great, but it's still a manual step. So now, if we have a dashboard that contains data that is relevant for you, that tells you, is this a good build or a bad build, then we can take this data and convert it into our SLI files. remember the SLI files earlier, it's a list of metrics, and in the DynaTrace context, we specify a metric query against our metrics API. So these metric queries specify what type of metric do I want. I can add the entity selector, these are the tags, and I can also add, if I have dimensional metrics, like metrics that are split by, let's say, a test name, I can also say, I only want to have this metric for test step invoke, for version, for echo, for homepage. So you can really define individual metrics for individual test steps. Really cool. And then filtering it on, let's say, your dev environment, your staging environment, your production environment, your front end, your backend component, and you can mix it with infrastructure metrics as well. And then what you have, if you basically wrote down your metrics, then you can also specify SLOs. What are your objectives? Maybe you have an objectives of 100 millisecond response time, then you can put this in. If you don't really know what the best objectives are, you may start with something very simple, like don't let this metric be slower than 10% of the previous build, because Keptn also allows you to do that, comparing with previous builds. This is what I would do. So then I immediately get a regression. So if we do this, now the cool thing is, instead of manually looking at dashboards, even though these dashboards might be a little more telling now than before, but instead of manually looking at dashboards from build to build to build, Keptn now does this for me. Keptn automates exactly these steps that I do. Looking at the metrics, comparing them with the previous build or with a static threshold, calculates an overall confidence score, right? Good, or not good. And I'll see it in a heat map. And obviously this can also be retrieved by API, which is why we can integrate it in Jenkins and then let the pipeline fail. On the bottom, you also see the visualization again that I had earlier with the metrics over the time frame as well. So this is what we can achieve. All right, so my first demo, because I want to show you obviously how this works in real life. I have baked this into a Jenkins pipeline. By the way, what I actually built, I have built a Jenkins tutorial with currently 3 use cases, and these are the 3 use cases I want to show you today live. The first one is a very simple one where I built a Jenkins pipeline that is just triggering an evaluation. So I assume I have some system, there's some load on it, and I can say, please Keptn, take a particular time frame, pull out the metrics and tell me what's wrong, what the result is. So the way this will look like, I call my pipeline and then it will run and then it will give me the result. And I will just kick it off quickly. All right, so let's do this. Okay, it is my, by the way, all of this is from this tutorial. So if you want to do this yourself, just check out the tutorial, and I also have all the descriptions in there in the Jenkins pipelines. So the first one is called the Keptn Quality Gate Evaluation. And I say build with parameters. So what I say here is, remember Keptn has the notion of a project, a stage, and service. So I still need to provide these 3 values. But my pipeline is automatically then creating a Keptn project in case it doesn't exist. It automatically creates it with that stage in case it doesn't exist, and it automatically creates a service. Then it automatically configures my monitoring tool. It automatically uploads a set of SLIs to make it easier. I just basically specify 2, and then I can give it a time frame, and then I can say how long should I wait for the result, because it takes just a second or 2. Now what's important here, service, eval service, my SLI that I specified here is actually referencing that name. So it's calling DynaTrace and say, give me these metrics that are specified in here from services in DynaTrace that are tagged with eval service. So let me actually kick this off. Now let me go to DynaTrace. Here's my dashboard that I showed you earlier. And remember with the tagging, this is really cool. So now I can say, show me the services that are tagged with eval service. Here we go. So I have one application, it can run anywhere. I don't care where it runs. Most important thing is, in my case here, I have evaluation service. Eval service is a tag on it. Okay. So now what my Jenkins pipeline actually does, actually let me go back to the slides because I believe I have it highlighted. So what I've built is I have a Keptn init stage where really I'm just using my Keptn Jenkins library. So it's an init call, and I give it the project name, the stage name, the service name, and the monitoring tool. And what it does, it just makes a call to Keptn create project, with the project name, and it also automatically creates a shipyard file with that individual stage in there. So we're creating single stage Keptn projects in this case, because that's really what we want, a single stage, because we just want to use Keptn for quality gates. Then it will create the service, evaluation service, because that's what I passed it on. And I'm also now uploading my local SLI, my SLO file, and a new config file for DynaTrace. So the cool thing here is if you have your own Jenkins pipelines and you have your source code repo with your source code of your app and maybe your tests, then the only thing you have to add is SLI and SLO, and then you just, every time from your pipeline, you just upload it to Keptn. And then Keptn has it internally. It doesn't need to access your Git, and that's it. So once Keptn has everything, then my next stage here is making a single call to my Keptn Jenkins library. It's called send start evaluation event, where you can pass in either a start and an end time frame, and numbers in minutes, where I basically say evaluate the last 600 seconds and so on. It does the automatic calculation of the timestamps. But basically what happens now is Keptn will take every individual SLI that I've specified and uploaded. It will then look at the SLI and will actually it will transform the SLI, because in the SLIs, in order to not make them hard-coded for a particular app, but in order for you to reuse SLIs, you can also specify placeholders. So for instance, I assume request count is something you want to have all the time. The only thing I'm doing here, I say I want to have the request count, so that's kind of the throughput metric, for a service that has a tag on it that is exactly the same name as my Keptn project. So this is why this gets translated into this particular query, and the timestamp, the from and to, will be applied. Then this query will be executed against the DynaTrace metrics API for not only one SLI, but for every single SLI that I have in there. Then in my Jenkins pipeline, I can also say wait for completion. This is another function that I wrote in my Keptn Jenkins library. It will basically wait until Keptn is truly done with the evaluation, because it can take about a minute or so. Once the results come back, it will report it back, and then you can also say, do you want to let the pipeline fail, yes or no? And what Keptn also does, because I have the DynaTrace integration turned on, it will also send the result back to DynaTrace. So let me show you all of this. Let me first, because I completely forgot about this. Where is my, there we go. The first thing I wanted to show you are these SLIs. Remember, so this is the basic SLI. So my example, you can just run it and it comes with these. So here's my basic SLI file. These are these metrics, or these SLI definitions. So this is this one here. So basically what happened behind the scenes, Keptn was just basically executing all of these queries, but it was replacing the placeholders and it was adding the timestamp in the back. That's it. So if I go back to this gentleman here, exactly, and if I zoom in again a little bit, then what I see on the bottom is an automatic event that was also sent from Keptn to DynaTrace, because I have the DynaTrace integration turned on. Hey, there was a quality gate evaluated and it failed with 60 out of 100 potential points. Plus I get a whole lot of information. For instance, I get a link back to the Jenkins bridge. So I click it, then I get to the Jenkins bridge with a deep link. This is also possible. And then I get directly to the quality gate overview. So here I see, it seems my build is always failing, but that's okay. But I see the automatic evaluation. We support labels now. So every time when I call Keptn from Jenkins, I'm passing things like the build ID, the job name, the job URL, and it's all interconnected, right? So that's pretty cool. You can click on on all of these previous builds here that I have, and you can see all the actual values. You can also look at the charts and then chart it over time. Okay, so that's pretty sweet. Now, let me quickly go back to the slides. So this is the first pipeline. I think this is a standalone pipeline that just kicks off your SLI validation. I think I would probably use it primarily if you start building your SLIs just to validate, is my SLI document correct? Do I get back the right results? And you need to do it against a system that has at least some load so that metrics come back, okay? Now, second example, I have a second pipeline where I built into my Jenkins pipeline, I would call it a poor man's load testing tool. It's just an if loop or like a while loop that is just executing a couple of curl comments. But I allow you to call this pipeline, you give it a URL, and then this curl command is also adding these HTTP headers I told you earlier. So on the DynaTrace side, I can actually I can differentiate between the individual test steps and so on and so forth. And then so when I run it, it will look like this, and then I'll get the results. So let me run this one. By the way, yeah, this one succeeded. Keptn, not quality gates, but this is the simple load test with Keptn quality gates. So again, this is where a simple test runs. Let me run this. So here I basically say, hey, a different project, test with quality gates, quality staged. Now it's a test service, so I need to have a service tag with test service. Again, monitoring. I could switch between basic and actually let's switch to perf test. That's a good one. I give it a URL. So my simple load testing tool that I built will just execute a couple of different URLs here, /echo/version and so on. And I can also give it these are like comma or semicolon or colon separated name value pairs with the URL and then the step name. So version will actually later show up in DynaTrace and so on and so forth. I can say load test time, it should run for 3 minutes. I have a think time in here. And then at the end, it waits 3 minutes until Keptn returns the result. So let's do this. Let's call build, right? So now it runs. Also, while we're waiting, we see here that what the Jenkins, my library also does. It allows you to artifact, to store artifacts, to archive artifacts. Like I'm automatically archiving the SLI and SLO. I also have the Keptn context and the results. So the raw results that come back from an evaluation are also stored because we have heard requests that people want to have these results, obviously here in Jenkins. So that's also all possible. So now what's happening, it's kicking off my test. And after the test, it's enforcing the quality gate again. It's really as simple as that. And I actually have an animation that shows this. So what is happening now? I have a pipeline. So if you have a Jenkins pipeline where you already run tests from the pipeline, then I encourage you, add a Keptn init in front of it. So basically initialize the library, give it the project name and so on. It does all the initialization just as I explained earlier. Now, the new thing here is in order to figure out how long does the load test take and what's the exact time frame we want to later use for evaluation, I've implemented a method in my Jenkins library that is called mark evaluation start time. It really just takes as timestamp at this point. And then you trigger your tests, whatever the tests are doing, right? In my case, it's just a curl script that is doing stuff. And once that is done, once the test is done, you just call send start evaluation, just as I did earlier. So basically say, please start my evaluation. You don't have to give it any parameters because it will take the start timestamp from this method call. And if the end timestamp is omitted or not passed, it will just assume by default it is now. So the current timestamp. Then it will do the transformation again. In this case, it goes to a service that is tagged with test service, pulls in the metrics. Then I have a wait for evaluation done so that the Jenkins pipeline waits until the results are here. Once the results are here, I can let the pipeline fail and I again get the stuff in DynaTrace, the event in DynaTrace. So that's pretty sweet. A couple of things troubleshooting wise that I've noticed and that I've ran into. Very common problems are if you get the first error message, no evaluation performed by Lighthouse because no SLI provider configured for project. This means you have probably not installed the DynaTrace SLI provider or you have not called Keptn configure monitoring DynaTrace for that project. So make sure that you install not only the DynaTrace service, but also the DynaTrace SLI provider. It's 2 services right now. we're trying to automate that to have just a single install, but this is what it is. My Jenkins pipeline automatically takes care of the second one because it's automatically configuring DynaTrace monitoring. The second era, DynaTrace metrics return 0 results, even though I'm expecting something. So this means you either have you know, no data, or you have a wrong label, you have not tagged it correctly. Basically, you have specified a query that is returning no data because either it's an invalid query or yeah, you just picked a time frame that has no data as well. But that's what it is. And the last one, DynaTrace API returns status code 4.3. For instance, the query involves 1,779 metrics. This is where you also made a mistake in the query. Either you have not specified the text correctly, so too many services come back, or you have basically said, I want to have all the data of the time frame, but what we are expecting, we want to boil it down to a single metric, right? So when we evaluate a time frame, we want to get a single value for the time frame, and this is why you want to leverage the options of merge. So there's a lot of great documentation also on the metrics API out there, how this works. Good. Also some tips and tricks on calculated service metrics, because I believe this is the power also that DynaTrace brings to the table, because not only do we give you response time, failure rate and stuff like this, but we can give you metrics split by, let's say, the test step name that you've seen earlier, right? This is this is great. You can watch my YouTube video that is called DynaTrace Calculated Service Metrics and Metrics API, where I talk about it. Just some best practices: give the metrics good names. Metrics, when you define such a metric, they're always calculated for a particular filter condition. So, you cannot say calculate these metrics for everything in my DynaTrace environment, because maybe you have thousands of hosts and 10,000 of microservices. So that's why you have to specify a condition. My best practice is use a condition, so start small and then expand. What Keptn does, if you use Keptn for continuous delivery, right? Remember, Keptn always tries to use Keptn project, Keptn service, stage, and deployment. So if you want to do this as well, you could, for instance, say, create this metric for everything that has the Keptn project tag on it, or you come up with your own tag and say, every service that has the tag on it that is called for evaluation or for SLI evaluation, that should be the one. So it's a great capability. Now, the other thing, tips and tricks. I have a script also in the Jenkins tutorial that will automatically create these load test specific metrics. So these test step calculated metrics, just call that script straightforward and it will automatically create it. And then also the last tip, it's always good when you create a metric to test the metric out before you give it to Keptn. So put it on a dashboard and see if actually the values come in. Use the API Explorer in DynaTrace and see if the API really returns exactly the values that you're expecting, okay? And then put it over. Good. I also want to highlight one more thing before I go into the next use case. There is a DynaTrace, so I'm using the DynaTrace service and the DynaTrace SLI service, but I actually have a newer version. I developed some enhancements that were requested by some of you, the users out there. It is already available in these two feature branches, and it will soon be merged into a master, so it will be available anyway for everybody. But what these things do is they allow custom tagging rules, because by default, the DynaTrace service only pushes events to services that have exactly the 4 tags on it, the Keptn project service and so on. But you can see here on the bottom left, you can now give the DynaTrace service a dynatrace.conf.yaml file, where you basically specify to which services it should send the events to, and you can also work with the placeholders here. Also, it now allows you to have multiple DynaTrace tenant configurations per Keptn project. So if you have a Keptn project and you have maybe staging and production and you have 2 DynaTrace environments, you can actually specify multiple API tokens for that. So that's also possible. And for the SLI service as well. Good. So let me double check quickly. This test finished. And what I want to quickly show you, the console output. So there's a lot of output that I do here. I know I think better more than less. But there's also a link to the bridge. So once I basically tell Keptn, hey, start your evaluation, I get the link here, and then I can also click it from here. And I'm sure I'll find a better way to make this link more visible in Jenkins itself, but it's the same thing, right? This time the build is green. That's all great. All right. Next use case, performance-driven culture, provide performance as a self-service. So what I've seen, a lot of people like the idea of performance as a self-service. However, quickly need to have a sip here. There's a lot of questions, right? If you build this yourself, where do these tests run? How much hardware is needed? How do we stream the metrics? I mean, there's a lot of great do-it-yourself guides out there. If you go open source, there's obviously commercial tools that do this for you. I think about a Neoload that have an offering for this. But if you do it yourself, it's all doable, right? But still, it takes time and consideration and effort. So what we have done with Keptn is we have already available a Kubernetes environment where we run. So basically an expandable on-demand environment. And as we have from the beginning implemented a test-driven approach to our delivery, where we have integrated tools like ChainMeter or Neotus. So we say, well, we can actually give you a service where you use Keptn not only for evaluation, but also for test execution and evaluation. So that means if you have a Jenkins pipeline that deploys already, then like deploy your app into a certain environment, what you can then do, you can actually trigger Keptn and say, hey, I have deployed my app on this URL, now go off and execute the tests for me. So I can actually then give Keptn my test scripts. Again, I upload it to the Git repository. Can be JMeter, can be Neoload. These are the two tools that are currently supported. So then Keptn execute the tests for me in this environment, in this infrastructure that we already have. Then we do the evaluation. It happens fully automatically. Once the tests are done, the evaluation kicks in, pulls the metrics for the time frame of the test, does the SLO validation, at the end returns the result, and here we go, right? So this automates, so that means you don't have to necessarily build your own testing infrastructure. Have a look at what Keptn can offer. So the demo number 3 that I have for you now is another pipeline. And I'll actually show you, and live is much better, but this is how it looks like, and this is the result. So let me do this for you. So my last pipeline is, I call it Keptn Performance as a Service. So I assume I have an application deployed anywhere, and I have a URL to it. And now I have my pipeline. Again, Keptn project, Keptn stage, Keptn service. This perf as service will again be my tag. So my SLIs, as they are defined, they have they have to have the tag. So let me just double check which service it's going to be. So tag perf as a service. And as you can see here now, if you're familiar with DynaTrace, this can be anything, any application, Java.net, whatever it is, right? This is going to be my service. So now the cool thing is I have it running, and now my pipeline allows me to say, okay, what type of test do you want to run? Do you want to run a performance test, performance 10, 50, 100 or long? So here, the JMeter service, there's an extended version now that we have just promoted into Keptn Contrib, allows you to upload a JMeter script, but not only a script, you can also upload multiple workload configurations. And I'll show you in a second how this looks like. Let me just execute the performance 10. Again, which SLI should be evaluated, and then also the URL. And so if I click on build now, what should happen, Keptn will automatically trigger the test that sits behind this workload configuration, hands it this URL, because I could run it against different, obviously, versions of that app, will run the test, and then it will wait a total of 60 minutes until Keptn comes back with, hey, tests are good and the evaluation is here. And it will evaluate these SLIs. So click on build. All right, so let me show you, before I go back to the slides, to explain visually what happens. Let me show you two things. first I want to show you the SLIs that are called perf test. So you see here, here I have additionally to these 5 basic metrics that I always have, additional indicators for, for my individual test cases: invoke, echo, version, and homepage. So give me the response time of my test case that is called invoke. Give me the response time of the test case echo. Give me the number of service calls. So I'm testing a microservice app. Give me the number of service calls this app is making to the next layer. I have my queries here, right? These are just DynaTrace queries using these new calculated service metrics, filtering on the test case, and so on and so forth. Oh, test's already finished. I also completely forgot about this. You see my my Slack notification pop up because I've also integrated Keptn with Slack. I even get notifications as things are done. And the rest is all straightforward. So these are my metrics. I have my JMix script here, and I have a new ChainMeter script, and I have a ChainMeter conf YAML. So this is now the new cool thing where you can basically specify different test strategies, and what you basically specify which script should be executed, and then you can pass in a list of parameters to that script. So I'm using it to control the number of virtual users, how often they loop through, the think time, and also the acceptance of error rate. So I can actually specify the test should be immediately be broken up in case I'm exceeding a certain error rate, because why would I even do anything further, right, if the system is completely broken? And this is exactly what I just executed with in my pipeline here. So let me go through here. So basically what happens in my pipeline, I do a Keptn init, it creates the project, it uploads my SLI, my SLO, and now it also additionally uploads my JMeter file and my JMeter workload configuration file. Then the only thing I have to do is, hey, Keptn, here is a URL. So we are sending a so-called deployment finished event with that URL. And what Keptn will do with this, it knows there's an app deployed. So it picks up the workflow with, hey, the first thing is we need to execute a test. In my case, I have JMeter as testing tool. You may want to use Neoload as well, right? It doesn't matter which tool, but I'm using JMeter. It runs the tests. It will also automatically send a test start and test stop event to DynaTrace, also a deployment event notification. So this is also best practice where with our customers, every time you deploy, every time you have a new version of an app, every time you start or stop a test, send this information to DynaTrace. Once the test is done, the SLI magic happens. This is just a short version of it, but you get the idea now. And it pulls the metrics, it calculates the results, it also tells DynaTrace about the results, and it either succeeds or lets the pipeline fail. So I think that's pretty cool. All right, the additional service that I installed here is the JMeter extended version that you can already try out in case you have installed the standard version. All right, I am almost done, and I know there's questions that came in, so we're almost there. Let me just double check. So this thing ran, it failed. Why? Well, the question is, why did it fail? Because I assume the evaluation failed, right? So let me go into my bridge again for the particular build. And again, I will make this link easier. Let's see. And exactly, it failed because we violated a lot of different metrics, right? The response time was through the roof. And also all these, they're all red, definitely not good. If you look at the charts, right, they have definitely seen, these metrics have seen better days. Yeah, there's something wrong here. Again, the link back to the information about which build actually executed it in Jenkins, plus on the DynaTrace, excuse me, on the DynaTrace side, if I refresh that screen, I also see, hey, we started that performance 10 test. Well, first we had the deployment event, right? This is the first thing, including the link to the application. Then the test started, then the test finished, and then the quality gate was evaluated. So the information is in all tools fully automatically. And that's the thing, what I love about this event-driven approach of Keptn. And you can use individual pieces of it. Good. To conclude, if you are interested in trying this out with your own Jenkins to level it up, check out the Keptn Jenkins shared library. Here's the link to it. It's really easy to use. and also check out the tutorial that I used here for my demo. Give us feedback as well, but it should be really straightforward. Now, the last use case that I will cover in another webinar is breaking the monolithic pipeline. While I'm not going to talk about this today, I still want to show you that you can already try it yourself, because there's a Jenkins service in Keptn that can actually call individual Jenkins pipelines to do different things. So I'll leave this here just as a teaser. If you want to try it out, I'm definitely having another webinar on this. But this is how it can configure it, how you can map and link a Keptn event for, let's say, for deploy, for test, for evaluate, for promotion, for notification to a Jenkins pipeline, so that you can use individual Jenkins pipelines for individual tasks. And now I want to open it up for QA, but I want to ask you for a favor. Look at our GitHub repos. You can do us a favor if you star us, if you fork us, contribute. Also join our Slack channel. You can find it on the Keptn community page, and give us feedback. And now I'll see what questions. The first question is there a Kubernetes operator that can be used to set all of this up? There we are. So right now, the way you install Keptn is through Keptn install. That's just a command. So it says a CLI command that will then actually deploy an installation job in Kubernetes, and then basically installs Keptn from within Kubernetes. I think we already have a requirement for also an operator. I mean, in general, Keptn itself, if you look at the architecture and what we're doing with shipyards, we're getting close to the operator approach. But I think it's great that you also see the potential here in also using an operator for installation. I know the Keptn team is on the call. I'm sure they will hear this. Will Keptn be able to convert SLI and SLO into native queries of underlying monitoring solutions such as PromQL or DynaTrace queries, or should the users be writing PromQL for instance? So I think I showed this. The way this works is you have to write your own query language. You have to write your own queries. So these SLIs are specific to the monitoring tool underneath, right? That's why also you have individual SLI files in case you have different monitoring tools. So that means if you look at the Prometheus examples, the SLIs all contain PromQL queries. For DynaTrace, it's DynaTrace queries. Generating these queries for the tool is actually a really cool idea, but then we need to come up with an abstraction layer on top that can automatically generate it. What we are thinking of on the DynaTrace side is that we, for instance, look at your production data, and then based on the production data, we can tell you which metrics are actually relevant to your system. So which ones are the ones that are always causing issues or are indicators for problems, so that you can take these and then generate an SLI out of it, and even SLOs based on production data. So these are the things we're thinking of. Awesome. All right. Let me see. I want to actually make sure that I want to show you. Yeah, I think I showed this. What was the last thing I did? I ran the performance as a service. Okay, so this was this one. What I should actually be able to see if I go back to DynaTrace, and if I go to my tag perf as a service, just want to make sure that I really got it all covered. Oh yeah, here we go. So it was not only the quality gate. Yeah, I mean, I showed this earlier. So this is the great thing. It's all automatically forwarded. And for those of you that are on the line, I see people like Bert and Bill, Brian, and all these guys. Until now, Keptn could only send these events to DynaTrace in case you had all of these tags from Keptn on it. But thanks to the new extension of the DynaTrace service, you can just upload a so-called DynaTrace conf file, and then instead of, if this file exists, it will use these rules to send events. You can have one tag and there are multiple. If this doesn't exist, it goes back to the default way where it assumes you have the Keptn tags on it. But this gives you full flexibility of everything. Also, these placeholders they're not only limited to dollar service or dollar project and stage. You can also do dollar label build number, right? Build if that makes any sense, right? But if you're talking with Keptn, if you're sending Keptn an event, like get the evaluation going, run a test, you can also give custom labels to it. So remember what I had in my environment. I had, where's my Keptn, here's my Keptn. So I have build 7, job name, so I can add labels. Maybe one label would be the environment, right, that you're testing against. If you know from Jenkins in which environment you're deploying, you may just take this and add it as a label to Keptn. So then you can configure your DynaTrace integration and say, hey, you know what, DynaTrace, you are just posting your events to those services that have this particular environment label on it. And it also now no longer constrains you on just services. You can also push these events to a host, a process group instance, an application. So this gives you a lot of new freedom. Good. All right, folks. I think this is the end of my presentation. And if there's no more questions, let me see if I missed anything. No, it's these questions that came in. If you have any questions, I'll keep it open for 1 more minute. And while I keep it open for 1 more minute, I just look at my, this is all good. I just kick off 1 more test because I really like this one here. I like the Keptn performance as a service where I can say, I want to run a real big test. I want to run the performance long. And this runs a little over an hour. So I give it 80 minutes to wait. Thanks for the feedback, folks. So this one will now run for a little over an hour. And the reason why I like it, because it fills up my dashboard. So this dashboard that I have here, which I promised a lot of folks already that I will also automatically create this in my tutorials. On the top, requests split by response code. Then here are all of my test metrics. What I also did, I added links now from the dashboard to your diagnostic cases. So in case you look at the dashboard because something fails, right? You still want to have the dashboard. And then you say, hey, now I would like to go into the multidimensional analysis view. So click here. That's a link now to my multidimensional analysis view in DynaTrace that automatically filters exactly on my test cases. So that makes it easier. That's why these dashboards with links are extremely powerful. Okay, good. Then I wish you all the best. We have a holiday tomorrow here in Austria, May 1st. That means I'll try to follow the guidance from my wife to not work tomorrow. Otherwise she will, I'm not sure what she will do with me. But in case you have a holiday, do enjoy. If in case you don't have a holiday, then well, enjoy it. Hopefully the weekend soon. Thanks, Chris, for the Slack message that I just received from you. And all the best. See you next time. Bye-bye.